normally wake up this early?
I do wake up this early. What's not usual is my kids getting ready on their own in the background, so we'll see how that goes.
So they may make a cameo at some point, huh?
My daughter just walked by. She said, "Oh my God, can they see me?" I'm like, "No, you're all good."
Well, we appreciate you joining us so early.
Oh no, it's my pleasure.
Jill's in the Bay Area, so a couple hours difference.
Note the coffee cup. There we go.
There we go. That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. Well, I think so. Joel, if you could alert us if Champions TV is not going yet, but otherwise I think we probably should get going.
Okay. Here we go.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to lead off, and Catherine's going to do a bit of a welcome.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Catherine Gunsbury, and I'm the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility. And it's great to see those of you in the auditorium today, and welcome to all of you who are joining us via webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am really excited to introduce you guys today to the Ashoka Foundation, and in particular the Ashoka Fellows program. This is a exciting collaboration between General Mills, the foundation, and Ashoka in celebration of a variety of things that are going on this month, including Think Global, Volunteer Local, which is happening right now, the launch of our 2013 Global Responsibility Report, and finally, I'm forgetting the third one, so I apologize for that. But anyway, the point here is we're kicking off a series of 5 weeks of speakers who will be addressing a variety of topics that are relevant to General Mills and things that we care about in this space, including education, sustainability, and nutrition, fitness. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Spectre Meyer from Ashoka, and we'll get started. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Such a pleasure to be here with you this morning. My name is Spectra, and I work with Ashoka as a manager in our local office, and I'll serve as the moderator for our series, Global Innovators, Conversations with Ashoka Fellows. Really want to sincerely thank the General Mills Foundation and their team for all their work helping us put together this series. They've just been fabulous. And to thank you for joining us. Part of our conversation today will involve Q&A, and so I hope you can think up some really good questions for our fellow Jill Vialet. I wanted to give you a brief introduction to Ashoka for those of you who are new to our work. We essentially do 3 things. The first thing we do is we focus on finding and supporting social entrepreneurs, and those are really disruptive innovators around the world. We develop networks locally and globally to find these folks and then support their work across fields: health, education, nutrition, economic development, peace and prosperity. The folks that we find, we select as Ashoka Fellows, and they're invited into a lifetime fellowship. The second thing we do is we look for patterns across their work. So we have 3,000 fellows in over 70 countries, and we try to accelerate those patterns, the trends and ways that they're pushing their fields forward together with them and our partners. And finally, the third thing we do is we work with major institutions, key players such as business, the media, higher ed, to develop a different kind of ecosystem for innovation to emerge here in the Twin Cities and around the world. Some examples of those partnerships include working with Accenture to find social entrepreneurs, so people who are bringing about disruptive solutions from within companies. We've also worked with Western Union to pair executives with our Ashoka Fellows so that they learn about the field, especially in markets that are emerging markets for their business. And then we look for patterns with Boehringer Ingelheim, a large pharmaceutical company, as they're trying to explore new ways to bring health across the world. At the heart of all of our work, though, is our Ashoka Fellows. They help us see what's next in industries and in fields. So with that, I'm really pleased to introduce you all today to Jill Vialet. I'm going to give you Jill's full biography so that you can get a sense of what an amazing woman you're going to meet today. And she's right here on screen. So Jill is the founder and CEO of Playworks. She has worked for more than 25 years in the nonprofit sector, where she's focused her entrepreneurial skills on conceiving of and growing 2 successful organizations. She launched Playworks in 1996 with 2 schools in Berkeley, California. Currently, the organization brings play and physical activity to low-income urban schools in 23 cities and will reach 750 schools and youth-serving organizations this year. Jill was selected to the Ashoka Fellowship in 2004, and in 2009, she was selected to be a member of the Clinton Global Initiative. In 2011, Jill was named by Forbes magazine as one of the top 30 leading social entrepreneurs in the country and was recognized by the Women's Sports Foundation as one of the 40 women leaders in honor of the anniversary of Title IX. Jill is a mother, and she still plays actively by running and mountain biking, among other outdoor activities. I'm also really pleased to be joined today by Tom Evers, who's the Playworks Executive Director here in the Twin Cities. Our team has really enjoyed working with these individuals as they've expanded across the country. So to give you all a sense of their work, we're going to show a short video, and then we'll get started with some questions for Jill.
If you care about education reform, you need to be paying attention to recess because that's where kids figure out how they fit in. That's where kids learn how to interact with one another in a way that helps establish who they're going to be as grown-ups. Playworks is a national nonprofit that I founded here in California that is making sure that people understand how incredibly powerful play and recess can be as a tool to really make classroom time effective and productive and safe and inclusive.
Go that side, go that side, go that side, build your castle, build your castle.
Wait, no, here, put those two together.
Our coaches are earnest, amazing young adults. We train them and send them into low-income urban public elementary schools. They transform the whole school, and they are rock stars.
A few years ago, we noticed a huge increase in children under stress, and we kept seeing more and more kids in the office that were really good students with a variety of things that were causing them to get into fights on the playground and just act in ways that we hadn't really seen with the intensity we'd seen. From the first day of school when we began Playworks, we went from hundreds of playground referrals a year that would interrupt instruction every single time to none.
Ready, strawberries.
We've just finished a 2-year randomized control trial. We saw that minimizing the conflict between being out at the schoolyard and recess and coming back in and being ready to learn, if you were just to monetize that part alone, we're looking at about 24 hours of recovered instructional time. That's about a 200% return on the cost of the program.
If a teacher's taking 10, 15 minutes of class time investigating fight or an altercation or there was bullying going on or something like that, you've just wasted a week to 2 weeks of instructional time that now we have back. I can't describe how profound an effect that's had on the culture of our school.
Schools pay $25,000 to $28,000 to have the program. Each city has their own executive director, and we fundraise the balance. Part of why we work so well is that they're going to invest in us being there. And that sense of ownership really changes their relationship to our staff person and the program itself. One of the key elements that weaves throughout the program is this junior coach program. There are sometimes kids who are natural leaders using their superpowers for good. Sometimes they're natural leaders who've been using their superpowers not so much for good, and we are redirecting them. It can be completely transformative in a kid's life. Play is not the opposite of work. The opposite of play is depression. When you take the time to build a really healthy culture of play, where the bullying is reduced, and you give kids a sense of ownership, then it fundamentally changes their attitudes about being at school.
All right, Jill. It's been really fun to be able to see here in the Twin Cities our kids out playing in the middle of winter with the same kind of enthusiasm that you saw on the screen there. So Jill, how about you get us started? Just kind of give us your overview of Playworks, help folks kind of fully absorb what they just saw on the video.
Sure. Well, first off, good morning. I must tell you from my vantage point, what I'm picturing is, you know how in those science fiction movies, the evil, megalomaniacal kind of criminal who's trying to take over the world comes on the big screen and their head announces that they want $100 million or they're going to blow up planet Earth. So I'm picturing that as my visual of my head. So that's a little troubling, but otherwise, good morning to you all. I love the video, just I think because it first off, it shows kids actually playing, and our experience, you're right on about launching there in Minnesota. It's been amazing, and I was there watching. I guess you all have recessed down to 0 degrees, which is completely hardcore and impressive. But I started Playworks 17 years ago with this very simple insight that play had changed. That when I was growing up, and I'm 48, and I grew up in DC, and when I was outside playing after school, weekends, and summers, I was largely unsupervised, but I was growing up in a culture where play was absolutely essential, and that the older kids were teaching us how to navigate the world. And then thinking back on it, and then being out in schools later, what I was seeing was an erosion of that culture of play. And so we started Playworks with a very simple idea that one really well-trained sort of Uber camp counselor, like grown up at each school, could really rebuild that culture of play.
Great. So tell us a little bit about that moment where you had this realization that something needed to be different.
Sure. So, I started my first nonprofit when I was 23. It's the Museum of Children's Art here in Oakland, and it's still going, and it's great. And the way MoCA works is we have these professional artists who go into schools and do artist residencies, and then we have a gallery where we display kids' art. So it was a Tuesday right after lunch, and I was visiting a principal at a school where we had an artist residency going on. And principals' offices really haven't changed since we were all kids, but I was sitting in that sort of outer there's the big outer office, and then there's the smaller inner office, and I was sitting, waiting for the principal to emerge right after lunchtime, and she finally did come out of her office, and she just looked frustrated and cranky the way only an elementary school principal can, and she ushered me into her office, and she started going on and on about how there were these 3 little boys who every day got in trouble at lunchtime and recess, and how they weren't bad kids, but they were starting to see themselves as bad kids, and how basically what was going on at lunchtime recess was really having a negative impact on the rest of the school day. And she's really worked up about this, and she looks at me and she's like, "Can't you do something?" And in that moment, I flashed on my own childhood. So besides growing up in a neighborhood where we went outside and played unsupervised, I also had this incredible DC Park and Rec experience, the Macomb Street Playground, and there was this guy Clarence, who was the lone Park and Rec supervisor. And so at 48, I'm the generation of women grew up after Title IX, but I often ended up playing with the boys. And I always loved to play whatever game was being played. And Clarence didn't make a big political deal out of it, but he made sure I got in the game. And I think there was this moment when the principal, Ms. Payton, said, "Can't you do something?" that I thought, oh, you know what? I could make it so every kid had a Clarence.
It's great. And I think a lot of folks would have just said, no, I'm here trying to represent my own work and organization. So were there other experiences in your life that sort of helped you have that self-permission to say, yeah, I could do something about it?
I think I've thought about this a fair bit, and it's been interesting building this organization and getting to work with people like Tom there, building your office there in that city. On some level, I wish I could, and then I've also, I got to tell you, being part of the larger Ashoka network and getting to be friends and have the support of a sort of network of fellows, it hasn't been, it's not exactly like I made this conscious decision to do it. There was much more, I would describe it as an experience of just sort of unreasonableness that sort of took hold. And it never it would sound much more lofty and virtuous if I could say, well, then I chose to do this thing and I put aside my own self-interest, and it didn't happen like that. I mean, it happened to me sort of like, I don't know, I've heard sometimes novelists describe the process of writing a novel and that their characters take on lives of themselves, and they feel like they're vehicles and they're just writing the story, and the characters do the weirdest things they don't expect them to do. A little bit being a social entrepreneur has felt like that this organization was meant to be, and I have been just incredibly lucky to, be leading as much as I have been able to. It sounds more woo-woo than I intend to sound this early in the morning, but it's been an extraordinary experience.
So you had this moment of realization that you could help every kid have a clearance. Then what happened, and what did you start to see as you learned about our school systems and their relationship with play?
Yeah. I really do think at my core, I am an entrepreneur. Like, I really like building businesses, and I like the puzzle of figuring out who should and could and would pay for this kind of a thing, and how do you generate as much revenue as possible for the activity at hand, and then how do you do it in a way where it's organized and that you can really execute against a plan. We use data compulsively at Playworks because I really want to know that I'm maximizing the return on the investment that so many people are making. They're donors and funders, and the principals are paying to have our program, and then they're also our staff in some ways. They're working for less than they might be making in the for-profit sector, and so their resources and what they're donating in terms of energy is really hugely valuable to me. And so maximizing all the inputs. So we set about with just piloting it in two schools here in Berkeley, and I've been reading a lot. The new Jim Collins book, Great by Choice, for me is a fascinating read. And in part, one of the things, and then there's also the guy who wrote The Lean Startup, that's also an interesting just business read. And both of them talk so much about the importance of testing. And I think Collins's reference is fire bullets before cannonballs, and so we were just, that whole effort at getting ideas out and playing with them and testing and being open to failure, I think. So we tried a bunch of things, and we tried having two people at a school site. We tried just the part-time day. We tried a bunch of different models, and it took us really 7 years to refine the widget that is our program in the schools to a place where it felt like it made sense to replicate nationally.
Great. And could you describe what your program does look like in the schools, just the sort of nuts and bolts?
Sure, nuts and bolts. And I should say, too, we've really, in recent years, moved to a place where it's Playworks everywhere. So we have two main things we do. One is our direct service model, and that's still the lion's share of our budget and our staff. And with that, we have a full-time, amazing coach, like you saw in the video, who is placed one per school at a low-income urban public elementary school. And she or he is there Monday through Friday from the very first day of the school year all the way to the last. And they are out on the schoolyard for every recess. And as a mission-driven business, we're really clear about our North Star is recess. So we do recess better than anybody else, I think, in the world. So they are out on the yard for the recesses, making that an incredibly positive, engaging, great part of the school day. Then there are four other kind of components of the program that then work in support of making recess great. We do before school and after school, so out of school time, where our coach is present and engaging kids in play. We have a junior coach piece that you saw where we get between 12 and 20 of the older kids and really indoctrinate them in building a culture of play at their own school. The goal really isn't for our staff person to come in and make play happen. It's around building this culture of play so that the kids really own it themselves, and by extension, become much more active and engaged in their own education. And then the other components, we do interscholastic leagues. So the different Playworks schools play against each other in girls basketball and co-ed volleyball. I suspect co-ed volleyball is going on there now in Minnesota. And then there's one more piece, and then classroom game time. So we work with, it varies depending on the size of the school, but we work in the smaller groups supporting classroom teachers to bring the kids out in small groups so they can learn the rules to games and play together in that unit.
Right. So as you started iterating this program, you learned a lot about how our schools work. So I'm wondering if you can give us the bigger picture of why this is so important, especially when it comes to academics and then also health.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, I thought I knew a lot when we were running it here in 70 or so schools in California. But the whole experience of scaling nationally. So now we have offices in 23 cities, and